American politics is generally a choice. It's a choice between the bad option and the less bad option. You have two choices, the Republican and the Democratic Party. Which one is better or worse depends on what you believe. But what if I told you there was going to be a third choice? Now, will they be a better choice? They will be a different choice. How about that, huh? A different choice. Enter Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the man who walks around without a shirt on to show you his totally natural body and doesn't wear shoes on airplanes. All the while, he shouts conspiracy theories that would make even the most ardent "the CIA killed JFK" supporter blush. Although, don't get me wrong, he also believes that one too. He's made headlines this week by picking Nicole Shanahan, a campaign donor and patent lawyer, to be his vice presidential pick, a sign showing that his campaign is both a viable and serious option, as well as an option that allows him to start getting ballot access in multiple states. He's running as an independent, and despite not being affiliated with either of the two major parties, he is polled as high as 22% in a three-person race. So there's actually a non-zero chance that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. could be the next president of the United States. So I wanted to learn a little bit more about him, and I learned that he is batshit insane. That being said though, 70% of polls are saying that Americans do not want Trump or Biden to be their next president. So theoretically, a third-party candidate like RFK Jr. could be very successful. So in this video, I'm going to examine this weird little guy, where he came from, what he stands for, and if he has a chance to win the election, and if not win it, to certainly influence it. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is, shockingly, the son of Robert F. Kennedy. Robert F. Kennedy was the Attorney General under his brother, JFK, and was the one-time presidential candidate featured on my shirt in 1968 before he was assassinated. Obviously, I'm a fan enough of the senior to have the shirt, so how about we look into the junior? They're quite different. They are quite different, as I've come to find out. And you're wondering why some of the very first things I'm telling you about RFK Jr. are who his relatives are, instead of, I don't know, his personal achievements or his qualifiers for office, is because we are in the world of the political nepo baby. America has never really been able to get over the assassination of JFK in 1963, or MLK Jr., or Robert F. Kennedy. That string of deaths in the 60s kind of represents one of the greatest tragic periods in American history. JFK represented a hope that in many ways still hasn't fully been replicated, and his administration is literally referred to as Camelot, the fictitious place where the Knights of the Round Table would meet, theoretically a sort of utopian society. And it is on the back of this incredible political legacy and nostalgia that his kooky, crazy, conspiracy theory-loving nephew is trying to build a presidential campaign. And to be honest with you, it's very possible that voters might not even have the correct Robert F. Kennedy in mind. A poll last year showed that only 59% of people could correctly identify RFK Jr. when shown a picture of him and his dad. And the people who could correctly identify him liked him less than the people who thought he was this, the original RFK. And to be honest with you, the only reason that we're even talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s campaign seriously at all is because of his last name and his use of Kennedy nostalgia. You might have seen his Super Bowl ad, which is, I shit you not, literally so lazy and blatant about how he's using the Kennedy last name that he photoshopped himself into one of JFK's original campaign ads from 1960. And they are so lazy that they didn't even get rid of the sign that says Vote Democratic, despite the fact that RFK Jr. is running as an independent. And their choice of this ad in particular alongside the song, the irony and the stupidity of it is not lost on me either. The song in the original campaign ad talks about a candidate who's old enough to know and young enough to do.
A man who's old enough to know and young enough to do.
Which would make sense in 1960 when JFK was running to be literally the second youngest president in American history, but doesn't really make a lot of sense now, because RFK Jr. is going to be 71 by the time Inauguration Day rolls around, which would make him the third oldest president besides, and this may come as a shock to you, Trump or Biden if they were elected. Believe it or not, guys, there used to be a period of American history where voters would not elect presidents who were past retirement age. Doesn't happen anymore, though. Thanks, Obama. But the advertisement didn't come from Kennedy's campaign directly, it came from a super PAC. And as part of paying that $7 million Super Bowl bill, $4 million came from his now vice president, Nicole Shanahan. And now, perhaps because of that very, very large donation, as well as close ties to Silicon Valley fundraisers, Nicole Shanahan is now being tapped to be the vice presidential nominee of the campaign. Aren't politics great? Nicole Shanahan wasn't the only person floated to be vice president, though. Aaron Rodgers, star quarterback and star conspiracy theorist, was floated to be among the top picks. This went away pretty quickly, though, as comments from the one-time Jeopardy host questioning the legitimacy of the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting went viral, and he was not selected by the Kennedy campaign. Naturally so. Still, though, it's pretty funny to think about Aaron Rodgers leading the 6-11 out of the wildcard race New York Jets to a bad draft position, while also trying to be the vice president of the United States. But there were also options that probably would have been politically advantageous, like Jesse Ventura, who's a former wrestler turned into a very successful third-party governor who is very much pro-vaccine, and as we're going to get to, that would very much be a help to RFK Jr.'s campaign. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, it's not a bad idea to go with somebody who signs your checks. Running for president is prohibitively expensive, especially for third-party candidates. In the 2020 presidential election, Democrats and Republicans combined spent about $6.6 billion. If you do not have a massive financial war chest, it is going to be almost impossible for you to compete in any meaningful sense. And to top it off, any third-party candidate also has to spend millions of dollars just to qualify for the ballot in all 50 states, which is something that the main parties do not have to worry about. So to put it mildly, in our current electoral system, which is also first past the post, which is a whole nother issue entirely, it is almost, if not completely impossible, as a third party to actually win. So actually, maybe Nicole Shanahan is not a bad pick. I mean, she's a patent lawyer, she had a great nonprofit about reproductive rights, she's very wealthy, she's very well connected, very smart, and apparently she had a fling with Elon Musk, so if she's close with him, she can convince him to make another bad investment. I mean, he invested in Twitter, why not invest in Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? So at this point, you're probably wondering, like, what's RFK's actual deal? What are his policies? What does he stand for? And if you're asking yourself these questions, congratulations, you are more inquisitive and thoughtful than the average American voter. Honestly, it's really hard for me to define the rise of RFK Jr. as anything more than kind of a vibes-based, not policy-specific dislike of Trump and Biden, maybe the perception that they're both too old or out of touch, even though RFK Jr. is barely younger than them. It's hard to pin down. Kennedy, though, probably resembles the average voter a lot closer than either Trump or Biden, because he has a bunch of incredibly hodgepodge, mishmash political beliefs that are seemingly contradictory and not guided by any sort of ideological logic at all, which is kind of how a lot of people think. He's a staunch believer in protecting the environment and doing something about climate change, which is probably his actual main qualification for office because his background is as an environmental lawyer, although his other qualification to run for office is his last name. But he also compared getting vaccinated and the government asking you to get vaccinated to the Holocaust and the Third Reich. He's a firm supporter of indigenous rights, but he also believes that COVID was specifically engineered to protect Jewish and Chinese people while targeting white and black people, as well as that modern mass shootings are caused by antidepressants. He wants to raise the minimum wage to $15, but he also thinks that Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci operated a modern coup d'etat to get people vaccinated in Western society. So these views are kind of very weird and all over the place. So his campaign is kind of one part liberal, one part libertarian, one part incredibly unhinged, and one part your crazy uncle from Thanksgiving. It's just very hard for me to take him seriously when instead of running on substantive kitchen table issues, he's running on microplastics are turning our kids trans. That's really not a winning message. There's a lot that you have to overlook in American politics about your candidates. No candidate is perfect. But let's just say you're on a date with a nice guy or a nice girl, and you're really just, it's the first time meeting them and you want it to go great. And they're saying all the right things, like, I want to treat you right, we need to communicate well, we have to trust each other, I'm willing to love again. Everything is, like, so good, and you're really just like, oh my gosh, this person might be the one. But every 3 minutes, he's saying something that makes you go, like, cryptocurrency is the best hedge against inflation. Or you're just talking about a sports team, and then he says children are swimming through a pool of toxic chemicals. Or you're maybe trying to ask, like, how many siblings do you have? And he says, there is no vaccine that is safe and effective. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that there would not be a second date, at least for me. And I don't think I would give this Tinder date gone wrong access to the nuclear football either. So can he actually win, though? Does he have a viable path? Well, it's a little bit complicated. Basically, almost all of Kennedy's entire family is lined up against him, supporting Biden over him, which is not terribly surprising given that they are descended from one of the greatest Democratic presidents ever. They are going to support the Democratic nominee instead of their crazy uncle. Now, despite their oversized presence in American history, the Kennedy family now kind of are just quietly in the background, quietly incredibly wealthy, with the exception of JFK's grandson, Jack Schlossberg, who, in addition to saying that RFK Jr. would make a bad president, also went viral for a tirade he went on against restaurants.
And we have to wait there to eat something that we don't get to choose, really, what it is. We only have a couple choices, and you don't know what any of them are going to taste like or what's good. We have to read something in order to get the food first. You have to read to get your food.
What made you so angry?
Because it ruins your whole life. You spend hours and hours eating at restaurants.
No, but their friends could want to have dinner with you or lunch.
Not
with you.
everyone likes dinner.
They don't?
Yeah, a lot of people, most people in the world don't spend their life eating dinner.
This clip is honestly so delightful. It's really rare you see someone that fired up over something that does not matter. That's the same level of passion that, his grandfather would apply to, I don't know, like poverty or civil rights, and he is applying to how much he hates restaurants. And
today, in the world of freedom, the proudest boast is
I'm never, ever going to a restaurant.
I just think there's something beautiful about that. But being hated by his family aside, RFK Jr. could easily be the most successful third-party presidential candidate since Ross Perot in 1992. In that election, billionaire Ross Perot used his immense financial resources to do a lot of advertising, and although he ended up with 19% of the vote, he could have easily gotten a lot more if he hadn't decided to just drop out of the presidential race and then re-enter it a couple weeks later, as if he was deleting and then re-downloading a dating app, except instead in this case the dating app is the American people. But there were some polls that legitimately had him ahead of the other two major party nominees. And what's also notable is that Ross Perot, because of his very high poll numbers, was allowed to debate the Democratic and Republican candidate, which normally does not happen for third parties. If the debates actually happen this year, RFK Jr. might have that same opportunity. The organization that creates these debates, which is currently being boycotted by the Republican Party, but that's neither here nor there, they mandate 15% to be qualified to be in the presidential debates. And historically, this has really further entrenched the American political system, because one of the main reasons why third-party candidates don't get a lot of votes is because they're not perceived to be serious. They're perceived to be a waste of a vote. Well, if you can't qualify for the debate because your poll numbers aren't high enough, but your poll numbers aren't high enough because you're not on the debate, and because you're not on the debate, you're not being covered by the media, and because you're not being covered by the media, people don't think you're serious, it's a feedback loop, making it very, very difficult for third-party candidates to get any sort of traction. But RFK Jr. is polling at on an average of around 10%. If his numbers improve, he could very seriously be considered a candidate for inclusion. RFK Jr. is averaging at around 10%, right around the cusp for inclusion in those debates, but there's a bit of a caveat here, because he has been polled as low as 2% and as high as 20%. And obviously, both of those can't be true, so where his real numbers are right now is kind of anyone's guess. Typically, third-party candidates do tend to lose vote share and fizzle out closer to election day because voters perceive them to be, again, not serious, a waste of a vote. It's likely that that'll happen here, but not certain. He's electable if you vote for him! And now because he's actually picked a vice presidential nominee, maybe he'll be covered more seriously by the media, or maybe he won't because he likes to post videos of him working out shirtless on Venice Beach, although actually, sometimes media outlets like that.
Who knew that under that sedate suit and tie exists a body even Rocky would admire?
But what is undeniable is that if RFK Jr.'s campaign does get ballot access in the swing states, which in our current electoral system are literally the only states that matter in electing a president, then his campaign will have some sort of influence on the outcome of the election. And at this point, it is fairly likely that he gets on at least some of the swing states, if not all of them. So it's very possible he will influence who wins the election. So the question you're probably wondering is, does he take more votes from Biden or more votes from Trump? And the answer to that is basically we don't know. The polls from the beginning of his campaign, after he had announced he was no longer running for the Democratic nomination and instead was going to run as an independent, those polls saw him probably taking more votes away from Trump. Biden did on average about 2 points better. But now, recent polling suggests the opposite is true. Recent polling suggests that he may be taking about 2 points of vote share away from Biden relative to Trump. So we don't basically know. And it's honestly possible it could end up being a wash at the end of the day. Look, to borrow a metaphor, if you're choosing between a giant douche and a turd sandwich, and then you introduce a third choice, which is a pulled pork sandwich, but instead of pulled pork, the pulled pork is diarrhea, there is no pulled pork, it kind of becomes a toss-up. Which of the three do you really want to choose? There's not really a conclusion or a message here, other than the fact that if you live in America, there's probably going to be an option on your ballot in November entitled Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he's a real candidate with a real chance to win. And if you don't live in America, well, then you can sit and watch and laugh at us in abject horror as our country makes another terrible decision on who we pick to be our president. Some of the policies he advocates for are good. Some of them are pretty bad. A lot of his statements are completely crazy and arguably disqualifying. But the beauty of living in America, we have the freedom to choose. If America wants to run it back with a significantly worse Kennedy, we have the ability to do so. But that's going to do it for me, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, subscribe to my channel. We produce content on current events, pop culture, news, stuff like this. It's a fun time. What are your thoughts on RFK? Is he crazy? Is he not? Do you want to leave a comment? Do you want to not? Do you want to argue with me? Do you want to call me woke like some commenters have in the past? I do read them all, so if you do insult me, I will unfortunately read it. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you for the next one. And as always, my name is Patrick, but my friends call me Pat.